into our open workshop for today. Before we begin, I'll just, are there any declarations from the council in relation to the matters we have before us? No? That's great. And I will, we'll go to item 1.1, electoral boundaries review. Attached.
Morning, Mr Mayor and councillors and all staff. The electoral boundaries review, we have been in touch with the Electoral Commission Queensland on getting ready for the 2024 elections. In the electoral review, part of it is looking at the quota of people per division. I'll take the report as being read, and this morning I sent you out an email stating that there will be no divisions. Has anyone got any questions on the report or any of the processes moving forward?
Questions against it?
So we can't change it, but admittedly I do find it odd that Division 6 and Division 8 encroaching into an area which is, it's literally south side. Now that's the Division 7 area, but because of numbers, but they don't really care about that. Is it just about trying to get an even representation?
Even representation, but...
Would it be that uneven if somebody had 4,000 here and 6,000 there?
But whatever issues you've got, we can report back to them. We have to report back to the Electoral Commissioner by the 1st of March. So any issues that you want me to take up, we can write it in the letter back to them. But usually it is just on a per quota basis.
Okay, so another question was, I'm just trying to think through if the public would like something to say about it, would a time at like the next election to have a extra little ballot paper say I'm happy to stay in this division, or I think it should be, or whatever, to get public feedback? Or?
Yes, there is an online survey, so if anyone wants to go to the Electoral Commission Queensland website, there's an online survey that anyone can have input into.
Okay.
And that was the survey I sent out to you all last week. It's very simple.
One of the points Councillor Paul has raised around being focused only on numbers does create some issues for our region. We've got sort of population densities in different pockets, and often to meet the quota, we seem to, Councillor Smurden's area is half the size of France, I believe, Councillor. So you have one councillor that has, a massive area geographically to travel, and yes, it may not be as densely populated as others, but I think there needs to be a balance between size and population.
Okay. One of the other questions that had come up from Councillor Devereux was about divisions and how we'd move to a divisional to non-divisional council. It is explained in that report, but it is a lengthy process, and all of the time it would have to come from the Change Commissioner to suggest any change in that space. And it's all on the Electoral Commission website and in the report. Yep.
I thought we were told the opposite of that. I thought it had to come from us.
We can put in information to the Change Commissioner, but it's only the Commissioner who can suggest the changes and do the review.
Thank you. Oh, that was through the Mayor, obviously.
Any other questions, councillors? Great, thank you. Ms Hatch, we'll move on to item 1.2, portfolio meetings.
So council portfolio meetings has been discussed a number of times at a number of workshops, and in the report I've just given a bit of history as to where we're up to at the moment. So we are presently looking at 2 questions on notice that were to the Audit and Risk Committee and the department, talking about whether council portfolio meetings are a political tool. And the State Department and the Audit and Risk Committee both said there is no legislative requirement to have portfolio councillor meetings, but there is a way in which, if you have a formal meeting, how those meetings are conducted. Previously, I provided a draft informal meeting policy as well for consideration, but that is when the department said no, we'd probably be better off having meetings as per our standing orders, which we'll be reviewing today as well. So it's back to councillor discussion on the whole purpose of councillor portfolio meetings, considering the administration, how it would work, you would need, what you would like, and then discussing that and working through which way is the way forward for this council.
So you're saying, sorry, Mr. Mayor, so you're saying that you put in a draft informal meeting policy that's not appropriate according to the department?
So it comes down to, so at any council, so we did a brief look, are waiting for LGAQ to get back to us on some statistics. At Queensland, out of Queensland councils, we found 34 utilised the portfolio framework and 16 utilised a committee framework. It depends which framework you want to use and what you want to achieve out of it. So when we first had the discussion, it was still very informal and just there was a list of requirements that we spoke about. And when Acting CEO Scott Mason was here, he suggested the draft informal policy, so we developed that. But then when it went through the process to the Audit and Risk Committee and the state, when they came to deliver training, they then raised concerns about the risks, specifically to councillors, about how they ask questions and putting them at risk, that it might be better to follow just the normal agenda and standing orders in your workshops. But it is completely up to a council to decide how they want those council portfolio meetings run, if they want them run that way.
Through Mr. Mayor, I think this change, the issue came about when it was one of the councillors suggested that we move away from the existing at that time informal process to a more formalised process, where every council was invited. That the advice we got from the department and the Audit Risk Committee was that then would constitute a formal meeting of council, and we would have to take minutes and.
Yeah, when we raised that with the state, they basically said, why would you even worry about having the informal policy? Just go to the standing orders.
I have a question around your policy here. It seems to be more of a formal meeting scenario rather than an informal meeting with the CEO, the chair, for briefings and workshop sessions. Why the change from, or why the suggested change from what we already have?
Well, it was suggested changes came from at a workshop that was suggested by council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the suggestion was it came up at a workshop, and then the suggestion was that we move to a scenario where we have portfolio meetings, but every councillor attend the portfolio meetings, rather than the two nominated councillors or three at this juncture. So, with that suggestion, then the change was that was, and the advice we received was that that change would then instigate a formal meeting of council.
That's right. And it was that every councillor had the right to attend a councillor portfolio meeting.
I'm just looking at this informal meetings policy, and we talk about briefings and workshops, which is what we have today. This is not technically an informal meeting. So I just, the title of the policy and then the suggested parameters of that policy would actually bring about a change to our workshops and briefings, is that correct?
Yes.
And at what point did councillors suggest that we wanted to change the way or the structure of these workshops or briefings?
Came through in discussions on the notified motion by Councillor Devereux, and also at a workshop prior to the notified motion being put in October last year, sometime around then, when councillors had said that they wanted certain requirements, and I wrote them in the report about that everyone should be invited, everyone should get notes about what was discussed.
That was for portfolio meetings,
right.
It wasn't for workshops or briefings.
No, this is specifically for work. This is for councillor portfolio meetings.
Then why do we have the terminology briefing and workshop sessions, which is what we have today?
There are no, even with, we don't take minutes or agenda, we don't take minutes for these workshops, so we needed to tighten up.
No, but they are live streamed.
They are live
So
streamed,
which is a form of minuting anyway.
This is, the way forward is entirely up to council, and that's what we need to discuss, whether this informal policy doesn't even, this was just a suggestion, we have to determine which way forward for the councillor portfolio meetings and continue working like we are now with the workshops. We can continue on like that.
Through Mr Mayor, the informed policy came about on the advice of the acting CEO,
Yeah.
Mr Scott Mason. The department is suggesting that we don't proceed down that path. But
Same with audit and risk committee.
But I appreciate the sort of historical perspective, but when I look at the suggested policy here, I don't understand the correlation between a portfolio meeting and what's in the policy. The policy seems to be directed with specific terminology of workshop and briefing sessions, which is what we have today. And the discussions, my understanding of the discussions we've had related to portfolio council meetings,
It would,
rather than workshop and briefing sessions. So I'm just not sure how this applies in any way to the portfolio councillor meetings.
through Mr Mayor, I guess where it came about was the suggested change to the portfolio meetings really changed the structure and the content of those meetings, and therefore we needed some way of addressing the notified motion. And one suggestion was to have a informal meeting policy to govern how those meetings were being conducted, because those meetings under the suggested notified motion really became a formal meeting of the council.
Councillor Smith?
So just carrying on from the Mayor, what you've actually said here is that the CEO shall chair a briefing or a workshop according to this policy,
yes, that was the advice of the, looking at other,
whereas now the Mayor does.
that's for the workshops. But for a councillor portfolio meeting, it would be the CEO.
So for the
Notice-
workshops, the Mayor still chairs the meeting?
In the yes.
But that's not what is stated here in the...
No, we can have a look at that, but that is, the workshops would be the mayor, councillor portfolio meetings would be the CEO. And if the CEO is not there, he'd delegate it to a director or someone else at that level.
I may be old-fashioned to saying, but I always had the belief if it's not broken, you don't fix it. And as far as I'm concerned, I can't see what the problem was with the old portfolio system that we had.
And through Mr Mayor, we didn't need
No, we didn't either, so.
Councillor Deborah?
Through the Mayor, I'm the one that definitely has a problem with it, because there are portfolio meetings with one or two councillors in them that I'm not privy to, and as a councillor, I feel like I should have the same information as the other councillors. So that's ideally what's starting me down this path.
But is there anything to stop you from going to those portfolio meetings without having a new portfolio policy?
If I can answer that, not knowing that they're on. That was part of my motion, you might recall, that we get told where they are and that they be in the same spots. Everyone knows where they are, but when they are. And if people don't attend, that they get some sort of notes on what was spoken about, so that we all have the same information. That was what I was after.
Councillor Milne?
I'm sorry. From my understanding, the intent of a portfolio councillor or having a portfolio position is to spread the load amongst councillors as we are around the room, because it is a onus to understand the whole entire organisation as one person. That is huge. So there should be an element of trust amongst us as councillors to actually information share. So you don't actually have to attend a portfolio meeting, but if you want to know about that portfolio, you do go and ask that portfolio councillor or councillors. So I think there may be a breakdown in our communication systems amongst councillors, possibly, because that could be easily fixed like that. Also, major stuff in a portfolio always comes to council, always. It's only you're getting more of an understanding of how that section of council works. That's my understanding, but I don't get a say or direction in anything that they do. It's more, I've got an understanding, and it's that public interface, because the public will come to me on a certain issue and I go, all right, get a bit more understanding, or I have more understanding of the strategic elements from council, so you say from environment strategies and stuff like that, because that's my role. So I can actually respond that way. I'm not expecting everyone to understand every strategy in depth, and it's having that share. So I don't personally have a problem with the way we've been running them. When I've had the portfolio meetings through the portfolios I've had, they've been quite constructive, and it's like, yes, bring that back to council and things like that, and it's just getting that little bit of understanding. I don't understand there's any secret squirrel stuff going on in portfolio councillor meetings at all, and they are very informal.
Any other comments or questions, councillors? Councillor Deborah?
Through the Mayor, I can't see how you can have a discussion with staff as a councillor on any issue and not give some sort of direction. I mean, you can turn someone a certain way depending on what you include, what you don't include. It's easy, you don't have to do it directly. And that's what worries me. When it comes to recommendations from staff, I want their best recommendations. And I know there's an element of you've got to trust the staff that they will take that on board to give their best recommendation, but I still want to know what was spoken about. Because
No, you're right, you still got the floor.
Yep. So that is the issue. And when it comes to issues of trust, then I'm not here to just automatically trust everyone. I'm here to make sure that things are done right and that I'm happy that things are being done right.
Councillor Stewart?
Mr Mayor, I just want to take up on direction, the term direction, and like the term influence was used a few weeks ago. In any of our interactions with staff, there's going to be always a certain amount of we are influencing them, we are maybe not providing a direction, and there's terminology in one of the documents he gave us which really worried me in terms of not forming any sort of even unintended consensus. And I'm thinking in any discussion we have, any questions we have, there's always some element of even unintended consensus building. It's just, and some of the restrictions are so tight on what we can do. But I guess, and so I'm actually taking it from, while I've got the same concerns as Councillor Devereux in terms of those directions and influence and whatever, it's just something that happens anyway. It doesn't matter whether it's a portfolio meeting, whether it's me chatting with one of the directors during a break during this meeting or whatever. There's always going to be a certain amount of influencing happening. It's just what happens when you even ask a question. And I'm very concerned about some of the wording because it basically means we are silenced because we can't, in case we give some sort of unintended direction or influence or consensus making.
I think Councillor Stewart's point is relevant. We are here to pass on to the organisation staff community desires, and we are the conduit to assist staff in understanding what the community expectations and the community outcome to be achieved. And you know, if the state feels that councillors being involved in discussions with the organisation in an appropriate way is not meant to influence, then we're actually not meant to be here, because our purpose is to guide and set the direction of the organisation that's in line with community expectations. It's an interesting world we're in at local government at the moment, where on the one hand we're supposed to represent community needs and concerns, but on the other hand we're not supposed to, influence the organisation to achieve those outcomes. Well, we were elected for a purpose, and the purpose is to guide the organisation in the direction that the community would like to see outcomes, and that requires councillors as a whole having interactions with staff that influence the organisation in a particular direction. And if that's unlawful, then every local government entity in the state is involved in unlawful activity. And if they don't want local government representatives, then just make that call and say we're not gonna have local government representatives. If you want local government representatives, you need to have that professional interaction that I believe we have as a group of councillors. I think we have a very healthy relationships with our executive and our CEO and our staff. And the interactions I've seen have been respectful and appropriate and professional. And I think we're in a phase in local government where the pendulum has swung too far, and we're losing our voice as elected representatives by over restricting and controlling legislation. I'll go Councillor Devereux, then Councillor Mill.
Through the Mayor, just speaking to that, I absolutely agree. And that's part of the problem, is we're in a situation where, you know, in one document there can be a contradiction where we're not allowed to give any sort of direction or influence, but we can advise, we may advise. Even though, yeah, the pendulum swung too far and all the rest of it, at the moment we are caught in the middle of legislation that means that we can say something can be interpreted as direction and we can get an OAA complaint, or worse. So those are my concerns, but my concerns are also about the sharing of information.
If you advise, you're going to influence.
Yeah,
You
that's
can't
my point.
advise staff on what a community expectation is. And if staff ignore that expectation or that advice and bring a resolution to council that is not in line with the community expectation, council will change the resolution anyway. So, and then we will influence the organisation with a vote to go in a particular direction that we gave the advice. So, I think the people that sit around this table have decent and honest intent in everything that they do, and I haven't seen anything to the contrary. And I just feel I know one councillor has said on a number of occasions, if this is the system that has been set up to deal with matters that occurred in Ipswich, then overreach appears to be the outcome, and we appear to be policing those that are trying to do the right thing, rather than dealing with the bad apples appropriately. I'll just go to Councillor Millen and then back to you, Councillor Deborah.
Mr Mayor, can I just ask through governance? So our role as council is that, that community expectation of bringing it into council, but there is a clear distinction between strategic direction, which is the overarching, and what we call mother statements, all that type of stuff that the organisation needs to plug in their operational to, and operational. Because I know as a councillor, it's just they'll say, oh, we need that footpath upgraded, go and tell them to do it. I say, well, I can't go there and tell them to do it. I can say that we need livable communities and we need to allocate funding for future strategic planning to actually achieve these and upgrades. I can't say that next year it's going to get done. So I think there's a distinction and that separation in that. So I can advocate and say, well, that's a priority area in my area coming from the community, but I can't actually get that outcome. And I think there is a bit of a community misconception that we have that power. Because I know I'm more the top strategic, and it's so frustrating because you really want to get into the operational because that's where you get the all outcome actions, but it's not, it's that overarching strategic and that intent that we want our communities to be in. So that's my own question, is that strategic operational split, and where do we actually sit?
So through you, Mr Mayor, all of the systems that we create in the governance framework is aimed at having evidence-based and strategically driven decisions that all of council make. So regardless of where the information comes from, if it is at a workshop, if it is at, conversations that you have with people, the directors and managers or anyone who takes a project on board, there'll be community consultation, there'll be evidence provided to say that is the way that council, that's the options that you have and council decides. So all of these systems are about evidence-based and strategically driven decisions for council, but there were other issues that were raised here was about trust and information sharing and OIA complaints. These matters can be dealt with through building our relationships, which also on the agenda today is our acceptable request guidelines and different ways we communicate. The whole purpose is, or the issues why this change was about, to me, was about trust issues and communication issues. And it wasn't about councillors, like it was both sides.
Councillor Jensen.
I don't have a problem with anyone coming to my portfolio meeting with me, but maybe after we have one, send an email about what was discussed to everyone, and we'll all be in touch with what's going on.
So who would send the email? Would it be staff or would it be councillors?
The staff, but that way we don't get it wrong. Get an OIA.
I'm just...
It's more honest.
Staff can't get OIAs.
I think Councillor Smith and Councillor.
I've noticed that we haven't had any portfolio meetings lately, they've been suspended.
We were to operate under the existing portfolio arrangements. So I'm not sure, like I've had a few that had been scheduled but had been cancelled for different
I was told
reasons.
that there was, they'd been put on hold.
Yeah.
I'm
Through
with
the
councillor.
CEO.
Councillor Devereux?
Through the Mayor, just on your point with the email from staff just saying what was talked about, again, that was in the motion that I put forward suggesting that we get it, and that created a problem, I think. My recollection is that that would then become more of a formal meeting.
More process, more administrative requirements.
And just if I can your point about at the time of resolution, recommendation, we get to decide and think about it. And it goes back to the portfolio councillor having more information because he knows what was discussed and how we got to that resolution, that recommendation, than what the other councillors do. Just saying what you've heard from the public. I mean, yes, a portfolio councillor in some respects is where people go to, but more often than not, it's not. I get matters about roads, I get matters about, building applications, all that sort of stuff. People come to me and I direct them one way or another. They're not coming to the portfolio councillors all the time, or rarely.
But through you, Mr Mayor, that's where you work together as a council team, and you probably talk to the councillor portfolio person about the issues in your division. And you talk about them at workshops and you talk about it at council meetings. That's how the information flows.
I tend to refer people directly to the organisation. But if I could give a hypothetical example, say we're dealing in one of the big matters that council has, let's just pick one out of the air and say waste. Okay, there might be 9 different scenarios that are possible that staff have identified, and through the portfolio meeting, things are talked about, and suddenly we're presented with 3 at a meeting, and we don't know that there's necessarily been another 6 that we could have considered. So, to me, that's the sort of thing that I want to be involved in. I want to know what those other 6 is. I'm not saying I'll disagree. I'm just saying I want to feel like I was in the conversation.
I've never been involved in any discussions where, say 9 scenarios were presented at a portfolio meeting and I said, well, scrap those 6. The interactions I've had with staff are more around getting an understanding of where council might be at. There might be options of, say, if it's waste, trucking it to another facility. Is that something, and the associated expense with that, is that something council would be interested in, or would they have an appetite to look at other options in the region? So it's in the discussions I've had, it's never been about we don't want to go there. It's more about the general feel of council, so staff can understand what the community expectations are. So I've never come across that myself. Councillor Mill.
Hartwig, just to follow on from that, that's the conversations that I've had as well. It's like we might come up with scenarios or whatever it is. My response to that is councils will require this information to make a decision. So that's the kind of bouncing back. It's not like we're going to put this in or put that in. It's just like, well, I feel that, we want a holistic understanding of this and that to make an informed decision. So it's more about extracting as much information from the organisation to make those decisions. And using that in organisation expertise. So we might have public expectations of they want this. Or if the organisation has information, experience, expertise in that field that says that is not possible, then you include that in that reporting so we can make those decisions. Because I would hate to make a decision on what the public expects without the knowledge that it's probably not a great idea, and I want to know why. So those are some of the conversations I've had in that respect. You never really do one or the other.
Councillor Friend.
From what I'm hearing, the main purpose of these meetings is to influence, to get the councillor's opinion. Thank you. To get councillor's opinion on questions, that's influencing. I spoke at the time, I want an equal right to influence. And I'm sorry, but I'll stick to that line because they are questioning sessions. The councillors must influence when they give an answer, and I'd like equal right to influence. The other problem which has been discussed at the Audit and Risk Committee is the danger of discussing operational issues. As one who's, of course, been nominated for an OIA award for asking a question about operational issues, which was how they present their financial reports. I feel somewhat bruised by that. So I just see danger signs on the way we used to do it, because it's individual, it is influencing, and it's dangerous. So hence my main request is to have a right to listen to them all if I want to.
I guess the challenge is, how do we facilitate portfolios without going to the the expense and the time involved of committee meetings, and meet those opportunities for council to be present. Has the department given any indication on the number of councillors present at a portfolio meeting before it reaches a tipping point that it sort of becomes a formal meeting? Like if you had two portfolio councillors and another, everyone was invited, but say 2 or 3 attended that meeting, does it reach a tipping point where then it sort of becomes a formal meeting?
No. But if I go...
So if all councillors attend a portfolio and are invited and intended, it still can be a portfolio meeting?
Yes, under the current system we can do that, yeah. It's totally up to the council. And from what I'm hearing, in short, from the request before, sent invitations to all, that's easy, that's not administratively hard. Ensure notes are taken, summary notes can be taken, and remind all directors of the importance, we want regular ones, so that can happen at any time now, and sees that all portfolio meetings are taking place at Town Hall. That might be something to discuss, because people will have to come in, or how we manage the location. But they're not difficult asks.
Councillor Ward.
Through the chair, my understanding is formal meeting is where we make decisions. So with us, it comes to a vote. We're not coming to a decision today, and neither are you at your portfolio meetings. The way I see it is, the portfolio meetings are informal. This is semi-formal. You're not really making a decision, and then you've got a formal meeting. Your portfolios give the staff, who are the professionals in whatever field we're talking about, have a bit of faith in what their understanding. Let them do their job. Give them a direction, an understanding of what direction the town wants to go in. Say if it's the aerodrome, do we want to keep it or do we want to develop it? I don't think that's a good idea. So then bring it to a workshop. Then, as a collective of council, of all councillors, that's when we all talk about the subject, and maybe we can pull away and go in a different direction. That's where we've got everyone together. Then you've got, so the way it is, I can't see a problem. There's 3 tiers there.
Mm.
So we can just maintain the system we have, but add invitations to all councillors and the like. Councillor Miller?
Just one more. We are reviewing standing orders later on, and I do note that there is a portfolio councillor update in those standing orders that should become part of our meeting. Maybe suggestion to all councillors that we actually enact that and work out with our portfolio councillor who wants to present those, because they are about, relating back to our operational and strategic plans and our corporate plan, and give those updates. So maybe we should really start doing that a little bit more in meetings. It may put another couple of minutes on meetings, but they don't have to be long and onerous, and that's a good information share with all of us and also the public as well.
Any other comments or questions, councillors? Councillor Ward.
Was this ever taken to the portfolio councillors before it came to us? We've got another few things.
Previously, so we'll go away and look at the current policy, amend that slightly, and then bring that back to council for formal adoption. And in the interim, we'll recommence the portfolio meetings as they've been nominated.
Can I just ask for locations? Is everyone happy with the Town Hall, or did you want it moving around? Town Hall? Okay.
Oh, no, sorry. From my experience in some portfolio meetings, they were held remotely on site and they are variable. So I wouldn't lock in one location because of some of the portfolios benefit from having travelling meetings, pretty much.
That's different.
I believe in the motion I put down
Yeah.
something to take that into account.
You said, to take place at town hall except where inappropriate.
So giving you a different word,
Yeah.
Mark.
Which was everyone.
But then there are some portfolios, like community sustainability, there or over at Shannon Street. It's just easier for staff, easier for councillors to go there to meet there rather than staff coming here and everyone coming here.
So I think that's the out clause that
Yeah.
Councillor Devereux's put in there. There is an option there to have it in another location if it's more appropriate.
Yeah, maybe more appropriate to have it somewhere else is better than inappropriate.
Councillor
Just one more clarification. Councillor Waldock did bring up the 3 tiers, which I actually like that explanation of the engagement with us as portfolio councillors, a couple of councillors, workshops, which is all of councillors, and then we make the formal decision. Because that's keeping in with what our portfolio is at the moment. I know there is a desire for everyone to come and have an equal input or say to a portfolio meeting in itself, but I can see that becoming quite chaotic sometimes. I'm more comfortable having this a couple of representations. That's what we're portfolio councils, no portfolios we don't. And then bringing all those important, bigger discussions back, because I've had portfolio meetings where there's not much to discuss. So it'd be wasting people's time. Just clarifying that in itself, because the whole invitation to everybody could become quite onerous and might be defeating the purpose of what these are then. We won't be having these as much, which I think is like more open and accountable because they're open to the public. So.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? We'll move on to the next item, item 1.3, CEO requests.
So councillor request for information. This is a review to really work out the relationship and how we communicate to each other through the correct channels. And I'm just going to hand out a copy of the legislation. I know we're talking about legislation not to be restrictive, but the whole purpose of the Local Government Act is to make it efficient and effective.
Just through you, Mr Mayor, you're talking about requests for information at the moment.
I'm talking about requests for information with acceptable request guidelines as part of that conversation. Not yet. So I just wanted to hand out this piece of legislation. So it's section 170A of the Local Government Act. And if it's read in whole, you'll see that the acceptable request guidelines is under section 7. It's part of the way that requests for assistance or information can be achieved. The 2 points that I want to make is there's a difference between requests for assistance and requests for information. The councillor, so a councillor including the mayor, may ask the local government employee, and the definition of the local government employee can mean anyone who's under regulation in the organisational structure, to provide advice to assist the councillor to carry out his or her responsibilities under the Act. And the responsibilities are in the legislation, but it is at that strategic level like Councillor Milne was talking before. Number 2, councillor may, subject to limits prescribed under a regulation, ask the Chief Executive Officer to provide information. It's not advice, it's to provide information that the local government has access to. Then if we go down to subsection 4, it just talks about what you can't ask for because that information is confidential or privileged. But under subsection 5, it talks about a request of a councillor under subsection 1 or 2, so that's for information or for advice, is of no effect if it does not comply with the acceptable request guidelines. So what we have to make sure today is when we review the acceptable request guidelines, that it efficiently works for you as councillors. Now in subsection 6 it says that the acceptable request guidelines do not apply to the mayor or the chair of the committee. It's because the acceptable request guidelines are the way in which information requests or advice requests are provided. It doesn't mean that the mayor can go and ask any question of any individual. It's just the way he does it. He would go through the CEO or he would go through however we write up the acceptable request guidelines to a director or a manager, it's the way he goes about, or the chair of a committee goes about asking for that information. So the acceptable request guidelines are under this section 7, and they are to be adopted by resolution of the local government. So I just wanted to take you through that one section 70A to see that the acceptable request guidelines are just a part of how we ask for requests for information.
Sorry, through Mr Chair, are there any concerns with the way the current policy is working, or are there any concerns the way the policy works as to restricting any information that's being provided to councillors?
I think there's been a lot of discussion about councillors not being informed if requests have been received. It's the way, again, about the administrative processes. So, did you just want to come forward? Yep. I've got the manager who manages all the CEO requests. It's a little bit different, but we have been working together to make this an improved process for councillors. I believe, like from what I have seen through all the different processes in the governance area, there are issues, including issues from council staff not understanding the procedures, and potentially we could include that in the acceptable request guidelines of what is expected, what is not expected of an employee. In that, if a councillor asks an employee a question who is an operational person at, say, under coordinator level, the councillor could not expect that information. Like if information is given, they don't have the strategic vision or the whole story. And that is why a councillor, if they ask a question of that, it should come through the higher level and through the CEO, where the council response is provided in full, so that a councillor doesn't go and make decisions or talk to people or anyone about information he's received from a council employee who is not at the sufficient knowledge level of what's actually going on. And that's what this acceptable request guidelines is about, making sure that everyone's protected and that the information, again, is given that is, again, evidence-based and strategically driven, and making sure it works efficiently. So I was just going to ask if we could bring up the acceptable request guidelines. We're going to go through and have a look at the, have you got the document?
It's on a link.
It's the link in it.
I've got it.
Yeah, that first one.
Yeah, she's on it there. That's the guideline.
I'm just aware of we've got quite a long agenda.
Yep.
I wonder
Okay, well, I'll just quick run through.
provide some feedback on that.
So what we've done is we have sent this away to get legal advice. We've also sent it to Local Government Australia, like LGAQ, and I have come up with some information which we are wanting to make changes to, so I can send that around and get feedback, and then move forward on making this process work for all of us. I just wanted to introduce Mr. to just provide a new report that we're going to introduce to councillors, to make sure that you understand where your requests for advice or assistance have gone to.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors. So this is really increasing our administrative efficiency and providing you with the information and responses that are expected. So as of yesterday, all councillors will be receiving an email acknowledging when an online CRM request is put through the portal. So that should be happening as of today. We've also got, I might just get a hand passing these around. I'll just talk through it. So essentially, we are absolutely, yeah, is that okay? Thank you. What you'll see is a report that we're able to generate as frequently as you like. We're suggesting quarterly. It's a summary of all the online portal requests or requests that you've put to council. So it has, and it's integrated to yourself. It outlines how many requests you've put in that time period, how many requests have been closed. It then goes into detail of every single request that you've made or that's been closed in that time frame. So what we're giving you today is just a sample of that. So you'll see that the front page, Is everyone?
How many pages are there?
Oh, there is, so we've just given you a sample today. So
Oh.
there's
Everyone gets different?
yes, absolutely. So they are individuals based on your particular
So that's four.
requests. So, sorry, yeah, they actually.
I've got one.
Okay, I got.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Random.
that's what I was going to hand them out. Okay, so if you could just ensure that you have the one that's got your name at the front.
Okay.
The email at the back is a sample which does refer to Councillor Stewart.
Dan.
So Councillor
Shane.
Stewart, we're just using an example.
Sorry,
Probably some
just to the change.
on an incident
Sure.
thing.
So
Dan.
what we're going to do is we're going to report back to council.
Yep.
Quarterly basis, or more frequently if council would like to do that.
And through you, Mr CEO, as some of the council requests have personal information.
No, that's what you keep, that's an example of yourself.
Obviously, we need to ensure that we're meeting our statutory obligations in terms of the Privacy Act. So the suggestion is that these reports would be generated through the CEOs, or will generate them, but they'll be released through the CEO or the governance because they have got quite personal information in some of the requests.
And just on the personal information, with the acceptable request guidelines, I'll send out a few other councils so you can have a look at them, but one of them about privacy information is also right to information. If a councillor asks for certain information under the Right to Information Act, that's dealt with differently to the acceptable request guidelines. And a reminder that if we do these reports, they are all open to right to information requests from the public.
I guess we've got months through.
Oh, they're all the same? Oh, so, yeah, this is just a copy, so we know.
Yes.
Councillor Jensen, Councillor Moore.
I really liked it when we had to go. It was like somebody been looking their stuff up all the time. And I was just talking to Phil Truscott this morning, face case, and he said, "I've just and I'm like, you got to be not that we would send it for coffee, but I would like someone keeping in charge of our stuff.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we did suggest that when we're talking about how we update the council portfolio meetings, all different administrative requirements, we are looking at that position at the moment, the councillor liaison officer. And governance work as well, it wouldn't be full-time.
Councillor Bill.
With this is actually a lot, I mean, I'm looking at mine, most of them operational. So if it goes through the portal, it's operational. Very rarely I'll go to the CEO for a CEO request. So these are just normal CRMs to me. I know I'm hoping this isn't an onerous task to produce these because I find it kind of simple as a process. It's a high level strategic one. Like our responsibilities under the Act is like making sure our local government does discharge its responsibilities and it's being accountable to community and we're complying with all local government. So under the acceptable request and CEO request, it's actually that really high level strategic directing stuff, and that's what's legislative to do. It's not, I want information on that pothole, why hasn't been fixed, you've got to tell me. Because that's operational, and that's, I think, that distinction that we've got to try and pull apart is I'm not needing 10 days response time on these type of issues. These are just normal, I'm passing on community operational stuff, that's it, or just finding a community and public, which I believe under acceptable request, if it's public information, you can ask because it's for the public. This is more about internal, strategic, long vision. It's not mostly public information for.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, like through the administrative action complaints that I see, this type of product will assist councillors in being able to, provide information to put the trust back from the community into councillors. I know it's at an operational level, but to me it's very useful, and from what I can see through the administrative action complaints, it would be a good product to have.
Part of the desire from councillors is to get information feedback, and if it is about a pothole or a road issue, it helps updating councillors on where they're at, even though it is an operational matter, because the first port of call of the resident and the expectation from the resident is that the council will know, and they'll come to us, and if we're aware of when that pothole is going to be repaired or where road grading is on the list, we can pass that information on to the resident. And when you don't know, because that information hasn't been given to you, that creates concerns for those residents. They just want to know that that we're aware. And as councillors, it's helpful when, if someone does ask you, where's that at, you can give them information and say, I believe it's, 2 weeks away or 3 weeks away, and that saves the organisation a lot of work as well, because we can then engage with the community, which is our responsibility, and pass that information on rather than someone down at customer contact taking a phone call, putting a CRM in that goes to another staff member who gets that information, that then comes back to customer contact, who then rings up the individual and lets them know. I mean, the process where councillors get the information and deal directly with the community is the most streamlined process.
And through you, Smith, this is a business improvement opportunity. Like through the administrative action compliance, we're always looking for ways to improve. It doesn't just stop it at council, it goes to the Ombudsman's office as well. And a lot of it can be put to rest through this simple process.
Through Mr Mayor, this process is really close to the so council are informed of what's happening with their reports. We are also in the process to identify all of the CRMs by division and how we can put that back to council, so you will get a front end load of what's happening within your division, but you'll also see the closing of the loop at the other end. So we're still working on that, the former of those two items.
Councillor Mill.
Are we going to get a distinction between what the CRM is, which is this operational stuff, and I'm not denying that it is important, but also the CEO request, because that's a whole different email system and for a different purpose. And that's the media one that I'm really interested in, because that is that long-term strategic understanding of what we need and information we need to make these decisions in this room. I know we want the potholes fixed, but I mean, I'm happy about this because we were promised this when we started the pothole system. So I'm really glad to actually have it coming out, but it's that other side. So I think there's two distinctions here.
So through you, Ms. Mill, you'll see that when I go through and put in the amendments to the acceptable request guidelines and then how information is coming through at those levels, then we can discuss it offline or through.
Through Ms Mayor, the CEO request, we've actually acknowledged that we dropped the ball there a few months ago in that space. We've actually had competent signed officers monitoring those and replying to them, and so we have closed the loop in that space as well. So I think I haven't seen one from yourself lately, but the other councillors that are raising it would have noticed that there's a distinct change in our response times in that space.
Any other questions, councillors? Not, we'll move on.
I just got one question. So the CEO request, they're under the legislation because our responsibilities under the Act. Getting information on the CRM is not really covered by.
It's about your roles as a councillor.
That's what I mean. So the 10 days, no time frames under the Act. It's about those responsibilities that are in the Act, but getting information sometimes you might not get it. So I'm just making that distinction between that operational and that strategic will be really made clear in the acceptable request. Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? We'll move on to item 1.4.
Okay, standing orders review. So again, this is, if we're trying to save time, this is quite a lengthy process as well. You should have it all on your emails or on your computer systems, but I do have hard copies here. The changes that have been made in the standing orders have gone through a review by legal and also LGAQ. And there was questions around opening prayers. That was one of the highlighted issues that we wanted to discuss. I will take the report as being read and then go through and see if there's anything else that others want to raise on the standing orders.
Just to clarify, the areas that are highlighted, are they areas that the change, we've discussed a change that
Yes, that's right. Or actually, the highlighted bits too were information from me from the legal team, just talking about changes that we may have made. The prayer one was one that we need to look at. Yeah.
Councillor Devereux.
I'll kick off. All right. Firstly, through the mail, I would like to apologise. I did do this for the last meeting, and then I threw out, I shredded all my notes by accident, so I've had to redo it. Otherwise, I would have given you notice. I do have a question just initially on page 97.14.4a. II, information copied from section 150 EI in brackets C of the Act, definition of local government act. I couldn't find it.
Please just say which, I've just only got the group copy.
Page 97.
Right.
It's our page 97. It's point 14.4A, which has been added to. I couldn't find what you've mentioned there, 150 EIC of the Act. Now, at the back, we've got,
Might have added one line.
Two other councillors.
Yeah, you've added a line in there. Is it highlighted? 14.4B.
A matter is genuinely urgent if councillor brings forward a notified motion and two other councillors' advice. No, that was legal input there as to the use of notified motions as a regular thing, that it was to not as be used as often as it was notified motions.
It's an extra to our old standing
Yeah.
orders.
Yes.
sorry, could I just,
So it's not legislatively required. I'll double check, but the legal officers put that in there.
because you have referenced the Act, but I couldn't find that wording in the Act.
The Act is referenced under A2.
150.
So sorry, councillor Deborah, you're talking about 14.4B.
14.4, and over here in the list that we've got, 14.4 in brackets A and then 2, and 14.4 in brackets B. So that's that whole new section, 14.4,
Yeah,
and it's the B bit.
yep. Yeah, that, I will double check, but that may be extra to put in so that notified motions aren't coming up all the time. Notified motions are to be used in certain, like, urgent circumstances or genuinely urgent. That's what that's explaining.
Yeah,
So you don't have to have that. This is for you.
yes.
These
Okay.
are suggestions.
The other thing is, if we go down to, and now I'm on page 110, guys,
Can you just give me the item number, please?
15. Just
Page one.
110.
Okay.
Generally. Just trying to find it here. I'm just trying to find where it is. 3 councillors are now required. Is that correct? For a notified motion. Actually, it's point 14 again, but I just can't see it here.
In 14 or 15?
2 other councillors.
Sorry?
Between 14.4B.
Track changes. No, it's hard to.
It's 14.4.
Yeah, there it is. It's the same one, 14.4B, 2 other councillors. So now, 3 councillors are required for a notified motion.
That's what I'm saying, like that, if we wanted to not have notified motions, should they be all the time like they have been going through a lot? Or should they be things that are used in extraordinary situations, or what they've got here as generally urgent?
Okay, so through the Mayor, this is a watering down of the power of councillors to bring something forward. Would that be correct?
Yes. But that's if you want to have notified motions all the time, and how you use your notified motions, that's up to council to decide.
Yes.
And this is a suggestion that if you didn't want it that way, that then there would have to be more councillors to support a notified motion.
Or we would have to consider the use of general business.
Yes.
That's another option.
Mr.
Okay.
Mayor Hartwig, I would respectfully suggest that this removes even more power from councillors to bring things forward in the proper. This is where we should be bringing things forward, as opposed to portfolio meetings. I would be very, very sceptical and hesitant to do that. Okay, so I'm going to run through my questions, just page by page. We're going to hit page 101, guys. So this is point 3.3.
So what was the number? 3.3?
101, page 101, and it's point 3.3.
Is that the track change document?
Yeah.
I'm flying back and forth.
Yeah, and if we can just refer to does anyone else want one?
I'm not sure I can give more information than I am on.
No, I'm going back between two documents, that's all. So much easier.
I'll grab one too, please.
Yep.
Maybe just hand them around.
Yeah. Right.
And if you want to write changes on it too, I can write them later. You're right, councillor Detta?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you.
I just grabbed one already.
Okay.
Right.
Righto.
Sorry.
Okay, through Mayor Hartwig, point 3.3, any provision of the standing orders may be suspended by resolution of a meeting of the local government. Can you explain, please, when this would be? Can you give me like an example? Because I just couldn't get it through my head.
Councillor Moon.
I believe that you, as the chairperson, did this once. I can't remember the topic, but was suspended so we could actually have a discussion. I can't remember the actual topic at the time. It was suspended normal meeting procedure during a meeting. Does anyone else remember that? I can't remember the topic because it was like we wanted to discuss it. We put the motion up and we suspended, and then we discussed, and then we went back. Do you remember that?
But it says any provision though, so
I know,
that's...
I think Councillor Dero's point is rather relevant because basically it says that we have a list of standing orders in the way that we're meant to run a meeting, but any time we can pass a resolution that we're going to ignore those standing orders and do whatever we
Or
want.
one part of them.
So then why have the standing orders
Yeah.
in place? There are provisions in the standing orders to, change, procedural motions and things like that. So I think the point Councillor Devereux's making is quite relevant. Maybe I'm not sure how Council feels about removing that.
I do
It's
know, and I
standard.
don't know when it happens, but in item 5, when it talks about the order of business, that had changed, and I don't know if that was by resolution a long time ago or not, but that may impact that as well. Like if there's changes to be made at the time, do that instead of, but I agree.
I mean, point 3.4 is a resolution is required for a suspension of a standing order. So would that be what you're talking about, the meeting, we can suspend it? So, yeah, I just don't understand what provisions it's talking about that we can suspend. So if we could maybe take that one on notice?
Yeah.
Thank you. Over the page 102, and this is point 5.4, D. And I notice in that list of changes that we've done, we've got matters of interest as a talking point. And I was just wondering where we would be putting that in there if we were going to include it.
5.4B, did you say?
D.
Oh, D, opening prayer.
Opening prayer and condolences.
Yes.
And I've just written here matters of interest because you've added that in as a talking point, but
Yeah.
matters of interest isn't there. Where would that be?
Well, I guess this comes up to the conversation now about the opening prayer, or did you want to call the segment matters of interest, or there was something else, community
Yeah.
representation?
I think the spirit of that section was to have council being addressed by other individuals in the community, generally in a position of responsibility or authority, so they could impart some advice or wisdom. And I think changing from a prayer to something that encompasses that, if it's a matter of interest, it could be construed to be, a contentious topic at the time that wouldn't necessarily be in the spirit. So, having someone from, other religious backgrounds other than Christian, or, having an auntie and an uncle from traditional owners come and give their perspective on some things, just pass on some advice or wisdom that I believe that's the intent of that.
One suggestion was words of encouragement.
What's that in?
And,
Perhaps,
and
perhaps some wording can be.
yeah, so if with the prayer at the moment, like we have a schedule of ministers who come, we would have to look at the administration of how this would be achieved as well. So we have got some suggestions, but that again will take up administrative resources. That could be part of that role of council liaison person. If it is the words of encouragement and how that could be rolled out, like how would we decide who we would have and how would we advertise it? How would that be administered?
Councillor Stewart.
I guess that's the one who was raised this issue. And there were throughout a number of possibilities. One would be to have someone coming from the community, and it's actually quite separate to Prayer Idea, to maybe challenge us and whatever. Or we can have someone, and you could do both, who comes to give those words of encouragement and vision. I guess it's really a bit of emphasis difference. But probably the words of encouragement and vision is probably where we'd want to go. That more fit in with what would hope the prayers are about.
Councillor
Through the Mayor, I do think we've already got like the deputations and so forth, the people that want to challenge or put ideas forward, make us think about stuff, specific things they have issues with. I think the idea is to try and broaden the scope. I don't mind having people come and do a prayer. I really don't. I just think, though, at the moment we run the risk of not being inclusive enough. We're inclusive of 50% of the population and not the other 50. So that's where I absolutely agree with Councillor Stewart there. So definitely something to consider. I can move on to the next page, unless someone's got some more points.
I think we're right.
Page 103.5.5. So when it comes to admission of deputations, the system that we've got here that it spells out basically puts the power of who comes and stands before us in the hands of the CEO and the Mayor, I think it is. I mean, I've had a lot of people come to me and say they would like to, and I've explained the process, and I assume that they've applied and we've not seen anyone come through. So do we even find out who's come to council and asked?
I haven't had, I don't think I've had any requests.
No requests?
No official requests.
That's good. That's really good, because it means that it's all up in the open. Okay, so special meetings, which is section 6, minimum time frame. So we've got here a written request for a special meeting of the local government must be signed by a mayor or 3 councillors. Propose a date and time. So is there a minimum time frame? Like it can't be within so many days, or?
Like it can be the next day.
It can be the next day?
There was 2 days.
2 days, is it?
I will check and put
It's
that
usually
in
for
there.
agenda, isn't it?
Yeah.
I only would practice.
But
Business
2
days.
clear business
Yeah,
days.
used to be 2 clear business days, because calling a special meeting and expecting
Yeah.
people to be, all councillors to be available the next day, maybe.
Okay, it does actually, 7.2 it says 2 days, so maybe we need to just make that
Yep.
in there.
Clear in there, yep.
I can't be 48 hours.
2 days,
Clear business days is 4 days.
can we define 2 days? Like, is,
Business days, you mean, or
well, that's another,
48 hours?
It's not.
that's another point I've got here. I've listed it here,
If you want to have it until-
all the timeframes I can find.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just discussing the 2 clear business days.
Yeah.
I prefer 48 hours because 2 clear business days is 4 days.
Yeah, that's
If
right.
it's-
Only on the weekend.
But if it's 48 hours, councillors could call a special meeting on Sunday.
Yeah.
Or Sunday,
That's right.
and you would have all the
48
staff,
business hours,
which is 2 days.
which is 2 days. 2 clear business days is 4
not clear
days.
business days. It's clear.
Monday and Thursday. You can't have it until Thursday. If you want it Monday, you can't have it till Thursday if it's 2 clear business days.
Clear
Right.
business days, yeah, that's where we got
Sorry,
stuff.
4 days. What about 48 business hours? That's 2 days.
Well,
48 hours would not, that would be
That'd be
48
6
hours.
days.
Yeah, not business days.
It says here, maybe it must be made available to council at least two days before the day of the meeting.
It's practical.
So if you want to have,
You have to put it in on the Monday.
48 business days is 6.
2 clear business days is Tuesday, Wednesday.
well, it doesn't say two
So
clear business days, it says at least 2 days before the meeting. So you could give notification on a Friday and have a meeting.
The meeting could be called,
Special meeting to
Next.
attend.
it could be called the next day. Depends how urgent the issue is.
It doesn't say clear.
An urgent issue?
Well, that's why it's special.
Sorry, that's what I mean. It could be the next day.
The other question
Oh, it's
is,
got it on page 95, it's 2 clear business days.
around making sure that it's, unless extremely urgent, between Monday and Friday. Because, giving notification that a meeting will be held on Saturday or Sunday, will add significant cost.
Sure,
Can't.
yes, it would.
On a business day,
Yeah.
Call a meeting,
Occurs on a business
then public
day.
holidays.
yeah, so perhaps that, gets added, call a business.
So can I just, did you come back to what, did you want hours or days or something?
Can I just quickly make a point, because there's more than just this one instance through the mayor, timeframes. I gathered up what I could quickly see. We've got, page 103, it says 2 days, page 104, 7 days, page 105, 10 clear business days and 14 days, page 110, 7 clear business days, page 110, 5 days, page 130, 2 clear business days. So the timeframes,
Not consistent.
they're not consistent, and I think there has to be not only consistency but an explanation of what it
I
means.
agree, and particularly, but look, if you're releasing an agenda, that doesn't really have that much cost on people, as is you have to attend within a certain time. So yeah, we can be consistent about how we describe the days and what we mean.
Thank you.
Can it be like by 9 a.m. 2 business days before, or something like that? I'm just,
I'll have a look and come up with some
Call them
suggestions.
2 common sense days. Would be between Monday and Friday.
No.
Yeah,
I
but
think,
no, I
I
think
think you
it's
understand the
just,
intent or desire on council's part.
It's just 2 clear business days.
So we can make some changes.
For clear business.
yes,
Next one, councillor Deborah.
Yep. Page 104 for everyone, and it's point, it was petitions, number 8. So it's got here, it's point 8.6. When a petition is first presented to an ordinary meeting, no but debate on or in relation to the petition shall be allowed. The only motion which may be moved is that the petition is received, etc. Might I suggest that we mention that at the time of taking the petition, because when we do take the petition, it does seem very dismissive. Would that be accepted? Yeah, no talk about it, and we move on. So I think, especially given that we now live stream, it might be worth mentioning to the public that we are not permitted to talk about this at the time. I just wanted to make that point while I thought about it.
yes, and so that it can be investigated fully.
Yes, yes, but so that the public knows that we're... There's an element of reputational risk
Yes.
involved.
at least we supposedly get reports back on petitions. Unlike before, there's a notified motion actually.
Well, it's in our old, it's in our current standing order.
7 is
I can't recall ever seeing a petition come back to council that's been referred to CEO.
No, not
No, copy of the response.
copy of the response.
Yeah,
has-
I've seen one very early on. We just got a copy of the response. And I was like, yeah, we got it, thanks.
And I think they have been mentioned in recommendations that we've voted on. You see occasionally there's a petition.
It's in our current standing order.
It's in the risk sample.
Next one, councillor.
Thank you. Page 105, guys, and this is 9 point.
Are we going to book a request or is it? Yeah, no.
Sorry.
A lot of these are already in the current standing orders.
Yeah, so this is my point about control with the deputations, point 9.2. The CEO must notify the chairperson who will determine whether the deputation is to be heard. So I just wonder if we need to have that. Can't they just come and talk to us anyway?
Well, the challenge is you can end up with a line, you could have 15 or 20 people here wanting to make a deputation, and part of that provision allows things to be shifted before we go down the path of having quite a number of staff here. If matters can be dealt with prior or without the need for a deputation, this here is encouraging us to do that stuff beforehand.
Because from my point of view, I mean, you've already said that we haven't had the people coming forward to do it. So the line is, whilst possible, doesn't seem like it's an actual concern. It's more, this could happen rather than it's likely to.
Yeah, it's a bit like, speed limits. Most people drive safely all the time, but the limits are there because it sets the framework of how we operate motor vehicles. This sets the framework on how we operate meetings, and we haven't, and maybe we haven't had a lot of desire for deputations because we're dealing with the individuals, through the organisation at council level, maybe better than we have in the past. So, it's at some point the decision has to be made on who comes to a meeting, and generally that falls on the lap of the chair. And if we get a request for a deputation that is a bit contentious, I'd certainly discuss it with councillors before making that sort of decision. If it's a run-of-the-mill deputation, then we'd bring them in.
Through the mayor, even if it is a bit contentious, I mean, we're not allowed to talk at them anyway, really. They just speak, and if they go out of line, you can close it down. And they are limited by time. That was just I thought, well, if a deputation wants to come and speak to council, I think as a duty to residents, they should be allowed to.
Well, they are allowed to.
Yes, but there's a decision made that they might not be. So you can say no, and we might never know. That's my concern, is that, there's it's a way of controlling that I don't think is necessary. Anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up.
Councillor Mills got a point.
Just for that one, I do agree the chair should have, because it's the chair's role as the mayor is to chair the meetings. But just for my own information, maybe someone can enlighten me, what would be a purpose of a deputation for a meeting for someone to come in? I've never had one, never seen one. So what would be a relevance for someone to actually come in to a meeting deputised to address us?
It probably would relate to a specific matter that was before council, where the deputation, you might have a deputation from an applicant and a deputation from opponents in relation to a particular issue, and it was an opportunity for councillors to get a bit more of a holistic view of everything, and hear from those individuals, sort of face-to-face, as opposed to face-to-face if you can. Generally,
that wasn't.
a lot of that interaction with those sort of people occurs with staff beforehand, and unless either side felt that the representations from staff in terms of the public report wasn't adequate, then then their needs are generally met through that process. But it's irregular or highly unusual for that need to be there.
I was just saying, because it says technically it is this days before the meeting, but we don't publicly release agendas generally about 6 or so days. It's 24 hours after we get it. So they wouldn't know an agenda item for a meeting. That's why I'm just getting, are they just generally coming to talk about a topic where they might not have a meeting agenda item, because they obviously wouldn't know it was on there unless they were told by staff. So where does it relate to a formal meeting? I know we've had people come make representations for workshops or briefings or, on time, but not for a meeting in itself. So that's why I'm asking, what would be the purpose of a deputisation at a meeting?
If it related to an application that was before council, both sides would be aware of where it was in the process. And in discussions with staff, they would probably say, well, when this matter comes before council, we'd like the opportunity to speak. So staff would be aware of that and be advising them to prepare.
All right.
It's it's not like, under our system of standing orders that we have the opportunity as councillors or staff to sort of throw something up and sort of push it through or without a due process. I've heard stories of many years ago in local government, that some things just got sort of rushed through and there's just no possibility with that now. All stakeholders are always engaged from staff in the development of the report. So it's sort of different circumstances than what we've seen in the past. Hey, Councillor Poppy.
I was going to say, the example would be the childcare centre people
That wasn't at a
came
meeting.
and made a representation to us in a meeting.
Wasn't at a meeting
Wasn't at a meeting. Okay.
about something like this.
Councillor Jensen.
Can we go back to general business? On page 89?
Have you finished?
No, that's all right. I don't know.
Sorry?
Right, we'll go back then. Keep the comments in order.
I'll just make it quickly. Sorry, I thought we'd finished,
what
councillor
point?
Devereux. I'll just change that 2 clear business days to maybe 1 clear business day, and then at least it's only 3 days and it's not double.
Just need to do it.
Sorry, for 54.1.
So we're going forward, not back.
No, item number,
Oh,
Sorry,
not the
pick
take.
a number.
What number?
Item number.
54.1,
4.1, general business,
page 130.
changing 48 hours to 2 clear business days, which is doubling it. So if you just make it 1 clear business day, at least it's 3 days instead of 4.
No.
Can we do that?
We're already going to look at the
But if you-
timeframes.
4:59 on a Monday.
Once you make it clear business days, you lose,
Yeah.
2 days on it.
yeah, if it's not in before 9 o'clock on Monday, you can't deal with it at the meeting on
That's right.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Well, it's
If you
actually,
change that to 1, and then we can do it at the meeting.
it's actually Friday night. I've had this discussion.
Yeah.
Which I don't know why,
Are
but
councillors happy with that change to 1 clear business day for general business?
That doesn't give a lot of time though, because you could put it in 4:59 on the Monday, staff don't get it till 9 o'clock, process it, notify.
3 days.
Pardon?
It's 3 days.
No, 1 clear business day is the Monday night before the meeting day, which gives you the Tuesday to process it.
4:30, 1 clear business day is 4:30 Monday. There's a clear business day which is Tuesday and then the meeting's at 9
Wednesday.
o'clock next on the Wednesday.
So it's not 3 days. I mean, we've only ever used general business once, I believe, really. I've got no problem with the 2 clear business days.
You miss the meeting if it's 2 clear business days.
That's right. I'm just explaining that if it's 1 clear business day, it's the Tuesdays. You can put a general business
You can put it in Monday,
notification at say
it's
4:30.
Tuesday,
So
and then at
there's-
the meeting Wednesday. Doesn't that make sense?
It's up to council.
We're going to discuss timeframes anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can go through and discuss the timeframes out of session.
Well, do we want to, while we're here on this one, do we want to deal with it? Are councillors
I don't even use it.
comfortable with 2? Do they want 48 hours? Do they want 1 clear business day? Councillor Devereux?
I would like to be able to put something in before 9 o'clock on the Monday to have it for the Wednesday, rather than have to put it in on the Friday before midnight.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the term is,
48 hours.
half makes no difference to whether you put it in at 5 o'clock on Friday
Yeah.
afternoon or 9 a.m. Monday morning.
Well, can we define the
It's when we
time?
run the reports, isn't it?
Can we just define the time on Monday morning?
9 a.m. Monday morning,
And that's your,
before the meeting.
because that's technically what it is now.
As long as the meeting's on Wednesday. 9 a.m. 2 days before the
2
meeting.
Nine-
days before
it's-
the.
yeah,
Oh,
9 a.m.
2 business days?
Don't clear.
No, I'll go through and make suggestions on each one.
Get out.
Yeah, look, it might be simpler just to keep it 1 clear business day or something like that. If we say 9 o'clock on Monday, it means every time a meeting day is changed, whether it's for a public holiday or whatever, it may not comply with the standing orders. So
I'll just have to check with the administration too on when the agendas and the reports get written,
Yeah.
and how they get written up and distributed.
Because it'll be an agenda amendment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's administrative.
back to you, Councillor Devereux.
Thank you very much. Page 110, 13, Merrill Matters. I just noticed that there's no time frame, like we've got in the notified motions below or in other sections for a Merrill minute. Is that by design?
You can do it right then and there.
13.1, it says the mayoral minute may take precedence over all other matters for consideration at the meeting, so it's rather important, it's important.
So there's no time frame. That's
No, well,
purpose?
it's not in there, no.
I know it's not in there, yes. So
No, that's what, can discuss it.
is people happy to have no time frame for that one? Okay,
Conflicts of interest.
okay. Conflicts of interest, yeah. Which is why we get the time. Down to the bottom of the page, 15.2. I think we need to look at this. It's got a local government that appoints a committee may appoint one person as an alternate member of the committee. An alternate member of a committee is a person who attends meetings of the committee and acts as a member of the committee only if another member of the committee is absent. So at the moment, like with our the cemetery committee, we've got both of us there and we often both attend, but this is only if. So do we have other committees with the same thing? Because I think we did that a lot with...
Risk committee, like if you were away, would you appoint someone?
Well,
In
Bob and I are
way.
both on it.
Yeah.
And both can attend. But this says only. Now, I know the audit and risk is opening up so that all councillors can sit there, but
Yeah, so it says any councillor may attend, but if they're on the committee, only if the other is away. And maybe the only reason what I can think about is if they're trying to stop people from colluding potentially. They're both there, like what's the purpose of the other person being there?
well, we initially brought this sort of thing in because we had 5 inexperienced councillors and 4 experienced, and the idea was to help the inexperienced.
I think there's a difference between, I think the committees that they're talking about here is the committee system that some local governments operate under. So instead of portfolios, they have committees, and councillors will be appointed as to those committees. So there may,
The committee.
the question I have is, are these provisions around committees actually relevant to us? So why do we include them?
We can, well, this is how they were, so we can
Yeah.
take them out then when we do that other
If
review.
it's not relevant to
Yep.
us, then let's perhaps.
But what if we we might have a committee made up in council for some reason, I'm not quite
You
sure.
can at a later date.
That's what I mean, and it's sitting there, it's not doing anything.
It's just obsolete now.
It's just not being utilised now, but if per se, there was a
But
committee.
there's a difference between a committee system that takes over portfolios and a committee that may relate to something. So if council was to appoint a committee to, look into some matter, or be a guide for a direction that council was heading, that doesn't relate to this section of the standing orders. My understanding is when we talk about a committee or this section here in the standing orders relates to the committee system rather than the portfolio system.
We get clarified.
And you can
We're operating under the portfolio system, not committees.
also do terms of reference if you set up a committee.
No, I don't know, it's always been in there, I
I don't think that makes sense in that context, because if we go to the committee system, we're not going to have only one councillor on that committee.
Yes, it depends. It depends on if we were going to committees, it would depend on the structure that we had around the committee system.
Okay.
doesn't matter
I can get clarification on
what
that.
they mean.
Yeah,
It's model, standing order, isn't it?
but it does.
If it's not relevant to what we're doing and how we function, we might as well pull it out and get rid of it, because it only creates confusion. And if another council wants to, change it, they can. Next.
Okay. just wanted an explanation, if I could please, on, it's 17, moving a motion. This is page 111, guys. The mover has, if the motion is seconded and debated, the right of reply. The exercise of the right of reply closes off the debate, and the meeting will proceed to a vote. So is that just when you say, anyone else going to say anything?
So
and that's when you move?
So the mover speaks first.
Yep.
Seconder has the second response, and then we go to those that are against and those that are for. And the mover has the right of reply or the right to respond at the end, and then after that we go to vote. So if you move, the process we utilise is you speak first and you also speak last, and once you've spoken last, then that's it, we go to vote.
So it says that the mover cannot, right to address the motion can only be exercised at the time the motion is made. It cannot be reserved to a later stage of the debate. The seconder can. So where does it say that the person who moves it can close it off?
It's 16.2.
Mover has, if the motion is just seconded and debated, a right of reply.
Okay, so what does it mean by the seconder then?
So as a seconder, under the system we have, if you move and Councillor Smurden seconds, you speak. You have the right to speak first.
Yes.
If you say have nothing to say, that's the only opportunity you have to speak. If the seconder wishes to say, well, I'm going to hold my right until other people speak,
Yep.
then that's something that they can do.
Okay.
But as the mover, you have the right to close debate. You are the last person that gets to speak
Even if
on the topic.
even if I don't say anything at the beginning.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So you could choose to say nothing initially and then sum everything up at the end.
Thank you. That's really good. It's not easy to understand how this is. I mean, it's easy in practice. You get here and you can see what happens, but
The right of reply, and I think generally speaking, it's supposed to be only replying to what other people said rather than
Yeah, you can't introduce new arguments.
material.
okay, that's about the timeframes again. If we go to page 115, 27 is the section. Got here, postpone this item to when? So it's got that the meeting can proceed to the next item of the business.
27, what point? 27.1?
I'm just trying to find the 27. This was late at night. Okay, so point B, that the meeting proceed to the next item of business. So when does that item come back in? Is that saying that it's put off to the next meeting? Is it saying that we're dropped?
Just dropped. That's my understanding.
I think if it was on the agenda, we would have to come back and deal with it.
No, it's just dropped. 27.1B, I think it's just dropped.
24, 24. Not 92,
The whole meeting has to agree to it, so but the meeting thinks it's a waste of time, they can just drop it.
So that means we have to strictly stick to the order that things are in?
No.
7.2.
The chair has the option to change the order.
Is that in here?
29 expands on it.
Somewhere there.
Yeah, that's what it is. They're all got numbers.
Oh, good, thank you.
Yeah, no second of it.
It may be
Right, it's
That
just
does
stopped.
come back.
stopped. It may be considered at a future meeting, but it's just dropped from that meeting.
So it's the same as laying it on the table.
No,
No, lay on the
Lane
table,
comes back.
This can be just.
Drops it.
Is there any,
Okay.
is there any point to that? I mean, if you've got a resolution before you that doesn't have any value or weight, then councillors can deal with that once and for all. Simply moving to the next item of business really doesn't bring a conclusion to the issue. It may postpone it to a future date. I don't see the value in that provision.
It's just one option,
I just think it's a standard
Never used it.
meeting procedure.
standard option.
I don't mind it.
I'd rather see whatever is brought before us that we deal with it.
But has to be voted on, so you move that motion. If everyone wants to see it get dealt with, it doesn't get up. Debate continues.
Well, that's like some things are
Yeah.
important to others, some things are
Yeah.
not.
Yeah,
So you get
But
consensus.
if you're moving that we move to the next item on the agenda,
Yeah.
or you're saying we're not going to deal with this today, it may come back to council in the future, it may not. Why don't we just go through the process and deal with it there and then? If we need more information, we can lay it on the table to get more information. But just saying, hey, we're not going to deal with it today, we're moving on, to me, doesn't have any value for either us, the organisation, or the community.
It'd be interesting to know why it's there.
Yeah,
I'll do some research on that one.
no, but in the debate of if you moving to the next item of business, so you have that motion to move it, then you'd actually debate on why we're going to move it to the next item or drop it.
Do you?
That should all, well, you've got to debate on anything. Then you discuss that. Then it actually might get pulled back down and not voted on at all, rescinded motion, like pull it back down for the mover, or,
But the chair, if it's just about moving on to, if it's a times constraint, we want to move on to other items, the chair has the opportunity to change the order. I think some understanding on the function and the purpose of that would be helpful, because I personally don't see any value in it.
isn't it during a motion? So it's not during any of the question time before, it's active motion, it's not.
During the debate.
Yeah, so there's an active motion, it's been moved and seconded, there's debate happening. It may not be, I don't know what the situation would be, and then it's just like someone in the room is like, no, we'll move on to the next move of business. This is the reason why. I don't know what the situation would be come up with.
I mean, if you've got a mover and a seconder and you're in the point of discussion, you're about a couple of minutes away from resolving the matter. I don't understand the value of that provision.
I can ask.
And a bit of assistance would help. Next one, Councillor.
Okay, page 124, 44 is the section.
Doesn't matter.
Page 124 on the agenda.
What's it about?
44, 44.1. We all there? At a meeting, a councillor or committee member may ask a question. A question. One question.
No.
Doesn't say one.
I don't think in any of our council meetings we've exercised, or I've exercised that control.
I'm not saying that this is a problem. I'm saying that
We need
this
to get
is
rid of A,
yeah.
because we've had very good discussion.
Questions.
And a lot of questions come through, and that's the environment we need to.
maybe
Can you put a limit on that?
question slash S maybe.
Time limit,
Yeah.
or the numbers of questions.
I mean, otherwise I'd still be back at the time frame.
Councillor, we can put a number.
That's why this is, councillors feel arrangement. We've got a good system operating here at the moment, we'll just get rid of.
Just thought I'd ask.
Just get rid of the word A and
Yeah.
put an S
They
on
ask
questions.
questions.
Okay, in terms of,
Page?
okay, this is on the what do they call that?
On the.
Attachment 2, and it's under section 8.5.
Yep.
Properly made submission. So 8.5.
What page are we on?
Sections of the.
Well, it says here, petitions, properly made submissions for petitions. I just wanted to ask, is there a downloadable printable Word doc to fill out where they can just add the bits in? online that people can download and use. I just wasn't sure about that.
Template example.
I think it's in the legislation too. Yeah.
Rather than saying what they have to do, it would be easier for people if we just had a principle. I thought maybe we already did, I wasn't sure. And on the same page, 39, this is about paragraphs 20.5, 20.6 require councillors only speak once and for a maximum of 5 minutes. So
What was that?
20.5, 20.6. Yeah. Is that the same?
During a motion.
So that's during the, okay. I didn't get a chance to go back. I've just got where I've come up with questions. So that's not in the debate. That's good. Debate. Oh, sorry, it's in the debate. Yes, it's not in the debate. Sorry, yep, back to front. That's it.
Any other questions, councillor Stewart?
I'd like to, Mr Mayor, go back to number 14, ratified motions. And I don't remember it being a special matter in the past. And I'm just wondering why that's been included. To me, it should be just on matters relevant to the region.
So that is a suggestion, if you want to go towards notified motions just being used every now and then, like not all the time, or if you're wanting to use them more regularly.
Probably been used less regularly this term, though Councillor Devereux did go through a spurt of maybe overloading us. No, but generally speaking, I mean, there's probably been less this term than last term, but usually might be 1 or 2 every few meetings. It's not like a big burden, and I just think once you start putting that word special in, then who defines that? And I know you've got a definition there, which I don't think is very good. Why not just matters relevant to the region? And drop 14.4.
Get some help from councillors. Is the part relating to general business, where
I agree.
I seem to have missed that.
89.
89.
Is that the one I was talking about at the time?
Yes.
It's page 89.
54.
It's 54.1.
Right.
Can I ask a question on the notified motions? Has this been through other external advice on wording and things like that? And this is encompassing legal advice on terminology. So that's where I'm seeing that some of this may have
Yes,
come
but
in.
some of it has been like, give us a suggestion to manage this, and then they will input. Right?
Yep.
So what I'm hearing is the notified motions, you want to use them more regularly, or using them for matters of interest, not how it's described there.
Yep.
It's not all it's not all, it's just suggestions that you can have that were provided by a legal advisor.
What's council's position? Staff are looking for some guidance or influence on this.
What is that?
Can I have,
14.
We're back at 14.
Councillor Stewart raised. Councillor Milne.
Mr Mayor, so what I'm reading is in 14.4, it's section 14.1 is a special matter is if it's genuinely urgent, and then B defines genuinely urgent, or it's 14.4A2 is not presently the subject to an application by the council or already something we're already considering. So that is, you can still bring a special matter. It's not already being considered.
But why should it be limited to special matters? How do you define special matter? That's the issue I'm raising. I say no, it shouldn't be.
But if we're already considering it in council through some of these other processes that we have been going through, an example could have been whatever we've been dealing with, then there's no point bringing a notified motion to council to consider, because we're still going through a process in the background that we are dealing with that matter. So
That's different.
yes.
Should be able to just do notified motions.
Which is why I withdrew my notified notion about prayer earlier on, because I thought, take 6 months, but wait till this meeting.
That's what I mean, so.
It's just being sensible, and I think once you start restricting things,
It's our standing orders, so we get to choose whatever council feels.
Well, I think we should be allowed to do a notified motion, and I think this is all rubbish, we don't need 3 councillors to decide.
No,
It's like we should be able to say, oh, we need that, good.
can we get that,
Just bring it to council.
can we just get that clarified? You don't need 3 councillors to do a notified motion, it's only if it's genuinely urgent. That's the only way you have to have 3 councillors.
Special matter, if it's genuinely urgent, why can't a councillor just want a notified motion?
Yeah, why would
Like,
one,
drop the whole section.
sorry,
Sorry, John.
just through the mayor, that doesn't make sense. If it's genuinely urgent, why would you need more people to bring it to a meeting than if it wasn't?
And
Because 14.4 actually dictates 14.1.
Yes, but we already said we'll drop.
but if we drop special from 14.1.
If you don't do something with 14.4, that dictates what you can bring in 14.1.
Just put either generally urgent or a special one.
Take special out.
Well,
Take-
matters of interest relevant to the region, that's what you put, that's.
So my suggestion was that we get rid of special and make a motion on matters relevant to the region by giving notice, whatever, and then just drop completely 14.4.
Any matter is what we've got in there at the moment. Any matter should do it.
But-
Doesn't have to
but
be.
changing it
Well, it needs to
matters
be relevant to the region, though, I think. Which is almost any matter anyway, because.
I just think leave it as open as we can because it is one of the few, through the mayor, this is one of the few areas where we do have some control over what we talk about as individual councillors.
Is
What
that
we vote on.
is there any councils that have objection to that? We're sort of trying to guide our staff here as to
Sounds fair to me.
what we'd like to see in the standing orders.
Can I make a statement, if that's okay, in regards to the notified motions I put forward, because there was a glut. I'd just like to make the point that there was, but that was primarily because I've been putting them off. We'd had the floods and everything else, and being mindful of the fact that the organisation was extremely busy, I gave a lot of, room for the organisation to get on with what it needed to do. But at the end of the day, there came a point when, okay, it's time to crack on. So that's why there was such a glut.
So we're comfortable with that 14.4 being dropped as described by Councillor Stewart?
You take the whole lot out?
So it's just matters relevant to the region or just say?
Just matters relevant to the region, I think.
I think so. That can cover.
So we can just do a.
Yeah, cover the just tolerate, even though it's not a responsibility.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to think.
Yeah, that's right.
Any other issues, councillors, any other changes that we would like to see in a document? No?
Okay, thanks. So we'll go back through, look at it all, and also look at the, any administrative, requirements as well, and that you'll know what they are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Orders.
Next item.
Busy, aren't you?
Is that item 1.4?
Yes.
No, 1.5, sorry.
Disaster management?
Disaster management has the responsibility for planning documents. Mr. Emery, looking under, fix that up?
So this is our Senior Officer Disaster Management, Michael Emery. Nick?
Good to see you all again, Mayor and councillors. So I've just been asked to speak today. I'm sure you'll all be excited. There's another bit of legislation that we'll be discussing today. Put that on the table to provide a bit of guidance and direction in regards to our roles and responsibilities in disaster management. So what we'll cover today is Queensland disaster management arrangements and the roles and responsibilities that are legislated by that piece of legislation by the state onto us, and the roles and responsibilities of councillors in disaster management. We also discussed in terms of our council the current state of our disaster management plans, which I've brought along today, and also a bit of our vision for where we're going to move into the future. In regards to what our roles and responsibilities are for our councillors, probably need to distance this presentation from that which you've been discussing this morning, because the governance arrangements for what you've been discussing this morning and the governance and authorising environment for disaster management are very different matters, and the state government has made it very explicit as to what our roles and responsibilities are in terms of councillors and other people in the disaster management arrangements. So our authorising environment, as I've said, is largely led by the state government through the Disaster Management Act, and it is very explicit as to what our roles and responsibilities are. So in particular, it removes any sense that disaster management is a council responsibility. So it asks council to establish a local disaster management group as opposed to council being, you know, the be-all and end-all of disaster management. So council is obviously a key stakeholder in our local disaster management group, but the establishment of that is something that is prescribed in the legislation. If I refer to the Act, I'm referring obviously to the Disaster Management Act. Section 34 requires for the establishment of a chairperson and deputy chairperson. So again, moving away from, while we understand that there's a mayor and a deputy mayor, these are very different hats that they wear during times of disaster. And in terms of their roles and functions are described in the Act, as is the role and functions of the group itself. And Section 35 obviously puts the onus on Mr Lewis in our case as the local disaster coordinator. And Section 36, moving to his functions or her functions, whoever the LDC may be, coordinating disaster operations is solely the legislative responsibility of the local disaster coordinator. So it may come as some relief to some councillors to know that there's very limited scope to which councillors are required to play in times of disaster, with the exception of the two legislative roles that are fulfilled by Mr Hartwig and Mr Smerdon in our current framework. So the Disaster Management Act also establishes the Inspector General of Emergency Management, or IGEM as we call it. And it's actually a function of IGEM to review the effectiveness of both the group, the LDMG, and any of the plans that we have. So that's IGEM's responsibility. There's no sense that is a councillor or council responsibility to be reviewing effectiveness and so forth. Remember too that the LDMG, our group, includes stakeholders that are external to council. So it makes some sense that there's a state body that oversees any kind of reviewing and governance in relation to those arrangements. In addition to those roles that are legislated under the Act, Council also employs some other people above and beyond those legislated roles, including our Deputy LDC, myself. And then during times of disaster, we second people from other areas within Council to fulfil roles in the likes of the Local Disaster Coordination Centre, manning evacuation centres and so forth. And in peacetime, so such as now, that's when we provide training to those staff, so they get taken away from their BAU roles and learn how to, say, run an evacuation centre. So we ran that training in November last year, and Red Cross runs that training, but it's all in compliance with the Queensland Disaster Management Training Framework, which at the moment is overseen by QFIS, Queensland Foreign Emergency Services. Little side note there is a current review into the Queensland Disaster Management Arrangements, and that will transfer to QPS in the near future. So for members of the Local Disaster Coordination Centre, there's an obvious importance to clarify our roles and responsibilities beforehand. And a lot of that clarity, as mentioned, is clarified in that legislation for us. But further clarity is also provided in our plans and our sub-plans. And then I think what's already been distributed is the guideline from LGAQ. So there's a further clarity that has been provided by LGAQ. And I think one of the reasons that has happened is that this conversation is not unique to Gympie Council. It's a question that has arisen, throughout Queensland, and that's why LGAQ has produced that document. So for those of you that might be a little more visually minded or like a sporting analogy, one way to conceptualise it would be that we have a disaster management team. Now, I've already been chipped by Mr Lewis for putting 15 jerseys on this.
At least in the rain.
But yeah, obviously Mr Lewis and I went to different schools, and I played a game that had 15 in it. So anyway, for the purpose of the analogy, the first three roles there are legislated roles. So we've got our LDC, our chair and deputy chair. and I'll leave it for others in this room to discuss whether there's any other similarities between them and front row people. Suffice to say that they need to have a good head to be in the front row, as is required under the legislation.
I believe.
Other roles, in terms of the disaster management team and in terms of where this analogy is going, the team primarily is fulfilled by roles and responsibilities within council, such as your deputy, LDC, myself, your roads and drainage people, your waste people and so forth. There's then very much a sense that we have a reserve bench. So if we exceed our capability and capacity in disasters, we have a reserve bench that involves an escalation to our other members of our local disaster management group, such as our SES, Fire and Rescue Service, QFIS, and we can even escalate our reserve bench to our state and even federal partners. I don't want to push this analogy too far, but that's the sense of it. But again, there's no sense that councillors, with the exception of those in the front row, are on the field doing the disaster management functions, but there may be a conceptual function that councillors could play in terms of supporting their team, our team in disaster management. Again, not wanting to push that analogy too far. So to provide further clarification, as we said, LGAQ has produced this document, including a bunch of do's and don'ts, what you can be doing as councillors. I'm sure you've all received a copy of that. So, in continuing with that analogy for a moment, we have a number of what we might call set plays, and they're our plans and sub-plans and procedural manuals, and they could be conceptualised as follows. So we've got our local disaster management plan, which is developed by not council, it's developed by the group. Again, getting back away from any sense that it's a council LDMP, local disaster management plan. And we've got our other sub-plans, and then in relation to our floods, we've got more granular, refined processes and procedures. And all of those plans and procedures and OPMs are here if you wish to peruse those today. Also, just as a matter of interest, those ones that are listed in red are currently subject to review. I'll talk a little bit more about that in future. So the way that we're pursuing this vision in future, obviously we've had some changes in regards to we're now operating with Microsoft Teams in council. So there is literally a disaster management team and various people from within council are part of that team. And you can see what's called channels down the side. So under disaster management, there's our plans. So they're all kept in the files tab there. So this will be the place where all of our plans and sub-plans are kept. And then we've also got channels for specific to evacuation centres and our training calendar and so forth. So that's part of the vision moving forward. The other part of the vision moving forward is to take a lot of these procedural type documents and align them. So at the moment, when it comes to a flood operational procedure, we have about 7 different sub-plans. So our roads people have got their sub-plans and procedures, our waste people have got their sub-plans and procedures and so forth. But what we want to, our vision is to do is to align them with what we're calling river height triggers. So when the river reaches a certain height, that will trigger certain actions from the different sections. And this is just a sort of a concept document. It's colour-coded according to those various sections. But that is something that we have borrowed from other council areas. So there's a sense that it is industry best practice to overhaul our plans, to bring them into this type of format. And there's probably no better time to do it now than when 22.96 metres is really fresh in our minds. So the proposed flood operational procedures manual, rationale for that is that, Mary River flooding is a all too familiar visitor to the Gympie region. Yet as far as disasters go, Mary River flooding is relatively slow moving and relatively predictable. By that I mean that at certain heights we know roughly where the water goes, with some exceptions obviously. So given the recurring nature of Gympie floods combined with our recent flood studies, we now have a degree of certainty with the extent of flood inundation at various river heights. The intent of the Flood Operations Procedural Manual is to provide a procedural reference which will guide all aspects of our council's flood response. It'll be a whole of council document. So we've mapped out something of our disaster management journey through to 2025. I won't go into all aspects of it, but importantly, there is a disaster management project plan which will be presented to ELT next week. We're also in the middle of our local disaster coordination centre project, for which we received a fair amount of funding from QRA last year. As I said, we're hoping to develop this whole of council flood operations procedure. And as I alluded to earlier, we're a key stakeholder in IGEM's review of the current Queensland disaster management arrangements. So, noting the transition of that governance over to QPS in the near future. So there will be some changes in regards to SES and people like that in terms of them going over to QPS. It's probably also worth mentioning we have some newly available public resources. I think last time we spoke I mentioned the opt-in alerts capability that we now have, which was timely given the IGEM recommendations. So our opt-in alert system is now fully functional. We have over 1,500 subscribers to that now. We'd obviously like to see that continue to grow. One of the barriers with that, anyone that's received their rates notice will have seen it pointed out that there's some confusion between our opt-in alert system and the alert system that is operated by QFIS, but that is, can be explained. But it is one of the barriers that we know in regards to the uptake. But suffice to say, we're at 1,500 and hopefully that will continue to grow. On that page, the disaster management page there, you'll see the flood mapping just below the opt-in alerts off to the left. Any member of the public can now click on flood mapping and has the option to select from a number of river heights, including 22.96 event, which shows where that water went, and also up to the 26 metre mark, which is a modelled prediction. It's important to stress here that the 26 metre model that they have made publicly available is by no means a forecast of anything that is being advised by BOM or anything like that. It is purely for planning purposes to assist people and businesses who may wish to plan for such an event. Again, getting away from any sense that is a forecast of things to come or anything like that. So when we're planning, when we're doing all this planning, it's probably important for us to discover, to recognise and acknowledge the three ins of disaster management. So one is that disasters are quite commonly infrequent. I know that might sound strange coming after 2022 when we had a number of them, but predominantly disasters are an infrequent nuisance. They're an inconvenience and they're inevitable. But given that they're infrequent, that can lead to complacency. So given the complacency that we may now launch into, if we don't have another flood event for a number of years, that's when the risk for us is complacency. So it's another reason that we really want to document our procedural responses and checklists while that 22.96 is still fresh in our mind. Disasters being inconvenient, that can cause us to focus or want to focus on other priorities, and disaster management can be seen as a secondary function. So we need to avoid that propensity. But obviously, given that disasters are also inevitable, there is a compulsory aspect to what we do in this disaster management space. So that's pretty much it for the presentation. I hope that has provided some clarity when it comes to our roles and responsibilities as councillors. Happy for these documents to be perused, understanding of course that they are subject to a review and subject to a new vision moving forward, but also happy to answer any questions.
I do have a question. If we move to a river height model, a river height trigger model, how does that accommodate the western areas or the eastern areas of the region?
That is, yeah, it's not so much a sense of moving completely to a river height model. We will still have the overseeing local disaster management plan and our capabilities that we've got through the likes of the SES in the western areas and so forth. The initiative that we're talking about here is purely in relation to the Gympie CBD, Gympie area. So
through you, Mr. Mayor, like with disaster management, it's all off triggers. So whatever the trigger is, if for out west, if it's flood heights, if it's certain occurrences that happen out there, we will talk with the operational staff and members of the community and working out what those triggers are I guess it's triggers more than River Heights, like Nick is talking about flood operations plan here for Gympie. But for the Local Disaster Coordination Centre, because it's multi-agency, we want to have the triggers, because say for example, Energex or other agencies run off triggers too, so that we have to line them up, exercise them and make sure that everyone's communicated through the whole event in time to be able to perform the functions they need to do. So instead of just River Heights, across all planning, it will be triggers, whatever they may be when we go through and talk and discuss it with our stakeholders in disaster management.
Even to the sense that we move from, alert to lean forward to stand up, we'd like all that to be consistent across other members of the group itself. But the body of work that we're mainly talking about here is in relation to the Mary River and actions and procedures that we'd like to really document and get down now, following last year's events. Again, I think one of the main reasons we want to do that is to move away from what we've experienced in the past, where we have that knowledge loss when people leave the organisation. So if we get those procedures really documented now, that's part of the reason for that initiative.
And it's
I think you'll find is the point on knowledge loss is very relevant. A lot of these river height triggers were documented when flooding was more consistent and regular, or more every couple of years rather than say every decade. And there has probably been a loss of that knowledge. But having it locked in a document, there are some changes too to which areas are impacted, shifts from residential to commercial and that sort of stuff. So it would be good to have all them in there but ensuring that we include the western areas and also the eastern areas, because we could have, as we did in January, out west wasn't really an impact here in Gympie, but quite significant out there. To make sure that the plan covers those other areas is important also.
The other point I just wanted to make was it's not just triggers for knowledge loss. It's also about changes in organisations that we have to document and make sure that everything's covered off, and that's why it's good it sits in governance, because we can then look at, say when QFES leaves, or in our local disaster management plan, council was going through a lot of change. We had new directorates and new staff, some from different states as well, where the disaster management is different under their legislation. We need to make sure that we're monitoring as we mature, and I think that's what Gympie Council is doing, that we are capturing all of our best practice for our operations, but also making sure we monitor through the local disaster management group changes of structures of organisations, and that's documented in our triggers. That's why the plans, like we go, they're all under review. They will continually review and change because organisations are continually doing change.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Devros, just remember it's a question.
Oh, all right. It's going to be a long one with a lot of commas. So I'm just noticing here the line, this is on page 134 if anyone wants to read. All councillors have an important role to play in supporting community members to be safe, informed, and you can. So really where it says all, that's a bit of an exaggeration. Insofar as
no, so disaster management is broken up into what we call preparedness planning, response and recovery. Now, in a disaster response, councillors are definitely have different responsibilities. Like we said, the LDMG would stand up in the mayor. But in other times of preparedness, councillors have a big role in supporting and getting our messaging out there about the apps and making sure that people are resilient in their communities. Like Councillor Jensen, we've spoken about new members to the community who are going to the country areas and how they get on. We've got kits, we've got different things. That can all be supported by councillors. That's the big important role, is getting the message out there about people preparing. And that's the role of a councillor, not so much in the response phases where we're talking about specific roles.
Can I just, while you bring up the kits, perhaps while we're being live stream, we would like to mention where people can get them?
Sorry?
The kits?
So there's kits that we will hand out, like if there's certain functions and things like that, we will go out and show them, but we can put an article on the website too. I think we already have about what's in the kits. So it just gives examples of what people should have ready and prepared at home.
And we've got the disaster kits, don't we, the council ones?
They're examples of disaster kits.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, we'd like members of the public to be developing their own kits that are specific
They
to their-
develop their own. This is just like a sample bag, I suppose.
Right, okay.
Sometimes. But I just wanted to make the point too, members of the community, are to be prepared and also get the support of family and friends. Peoples with disabilities and special needs, we are working with that group to identify people who might need assistance, and they too will be put into our triggers in our plans. But we work together as a community, working out who's vulnerable and who's not, making sure information is out and available so people can prepare for themselves, because one of the responsibilities is everyone has a responsibility, every person. Not just all of us, but members of the community as well.
When you say special needs and so, are you including like elderly people living on
Yes.
their own and stuff like that? Because they may not have family.
Yes.
Yes, good.
And we're working with the groups, especially through the recovery, social workers and different people who are on those. We are working with them through different committees through the flood recovery work.
Wonderful.
Mr. Mayor, Mick, it might be worthwhile just updating councillors on what we're doing in that with those special needs people.
So I'm not sure whether I mentioned this last time. So we do have a key point of contact now on the local disaster management group who's an advocate for all of the disability sector. So that's Cindy Buchan, some of you might know from Bravo Disability. I suppose there's a recognition that there's a bit of a proliferation of NDIS type groups, but Cindy provides that central point of contact for us to disseminate information out and get information back in. So there's currently discussions around with Cindy and with the likes of the SES and QFIS to develop a bit of a, both a register in terms of where these people are and what they might need, because extra time required and so forth, but also I don't want to call it an expo as such, but an event where we can get people from the disability sector together with the likes of the SES and start to workshop some of the challenges that we might have should somebody need to get into a flood boat, for instance. So those sort of things will be exercised in the near future.
We're also working with those groups to understand their needs for evacuation centres as well, like what's required so we can be better prepared.
I think the events highlighted the large gap in that space. Medication for every one of us is just, we'll just go to the pharmacy, but in a flood event you've got people that are isolated and they may not be in a position to communicate with someone in a disaster management facility of their needs for whatever reason, and having these disability groups understand that we can't do this as an LDMG on our own. We need your assistance to understand what individuals' needs are, and we also then need to plan forward. And if there's someone that has access issues, they might be in a chair, or they might not feel comfortable in a boat. They might be isolated at, say, 18 metres, but their home's not inundated till 22. What provisions have been made at 18 metres to ensure that we don't have to put them through the trauma of getting them in a flood boat if water goes above 22? And they're conversations that haven't occurred, to my knowledge, in the past, and it's definitely an interest of the SES. Steve Clough and the team there are really keen to make sure that they understand what their role would be, how they can facilitate that function. For QFES, there's been a number of discussions with not only the disability assistant providers, but also at QDN meetings around each person with a disability having their own personal plan and helping them through that. So it's an area that we understood the need, and I know the team, Mick and the team are really focusing on delivering some good outcomes there. Councillor Deborah?
I'd like to bring it up in this forum just because it's something that I have mentioned before, and I think it is important to take into consideration and it's not a criticism at all, but where people live in terms of their role on the disaster, in the disaster hub and stuff like that. Because if people aren't living where they can get to town because we've got floods and roads and highways cut off, I think that creates a scenario potentially where we don't have the people here who have all the knowledge that we need.
Are you talking about staff or in the LDCC?
I'm talking about staff.
Yeah, so we plan for that and we call what's flood them in, so we will have them and everyone understands that if at certain triggers that we go through, they will stay in town, they won't be going home. And that's the commitment that team have, and they have done that.
And that applies to local people. The last event we had some members that could make it into town, but then the eastern side would get inundated and they either weren't able to make it home and we had to find a room for them, or they could make it home but they couldn't come back in the next morning. They might have been able to get back in. So it's not only is it an issue for staff that may live outside the region, but it's something that has to be managed for those that live inside the region as well. Next question?
No.
That's
it.
No, yeah,
Is that
no.
only two?
That's it.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? Just like to say it's been great, the progress you've made. Mick, it's been good to have someone like yourself in the role. I know your engagement with the community has been very positive. I've had a lot of good feedback from members in the community, and I know you've got a strong determination to see these visions come to fruition. So it's great, timely appointment, and great work from you and Lorelle and the team.
Thanks for your work in the front row.
I believe that's our last.
Oh, one more.
One more.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Item 1.6, I believe.
Right there.
Should be quick.
Should be quick. There should be out there.
What have we got for that?
On.
Peter Canberra.
Need coffee.
Morning, Mr. Chandler.
Morning, Mr Mayor, councillors.
Morning.
I'm going to give you a short presentation on a state government initiative about reporting of, let's say, performance in the water sector. And Sky's going to give it for us. Thank you, Sky.
Morning, everybody. So for the last 8 or so years, we have been reporting annually to our regulator, and those results go up on our website for everyone to see. So there's 350 odd KPIs that we have to report on. The regulator recently has done an online version so that anybody can have a look and benchmark us against other councils that are similar size, close proximity, all of that sort of stuff, which is really interesting. So we thought we'd give you a little look at what it looks like. The figures at the moment are for 2020 to 21.
Yep.
Because we're still finalising our figures for the last financial year. But if you wanted to go to the PowerPoint.
Once we finish this, we'll go into the website and show you a little live.
So any member of the public can have access to this.
It's attached to the agenda.
Do you want a copy of that website here? I think we just mentioned it's attached to the agenda, so if you scroll down.
Oh, it's down further?
Yeah. Yeah, I've already seen.
That's it.
There we
Spoiler
go.
alert.
Yeah, so basically the overview is Queensland-wide. So there is 75 water utilities within Queensland, and so it just gives you a bit of a background on how many connections there are, how many kilometres of water main, that sort of thing, which is interesting. You can then zoom into your own council, go down a little bit further. So you can choose councils that are the same size as you, or medium ones, or remote, regional, that sort of stuff. So you can filter by different types of utilities. And so if we go down again, so this is Gympie Regional Council, and it has a little bit of information about us and how many schemes we have.
No dams?
No council control dams.
Dams that are council controlled.
Not ours, yeah.
So I keep going down, and so then we've got our billing information, just general of the that we're two parts. So our water is an access fee plus a volumetric rate. Our sewer is just access fee. So it gives you the overall details of how many connections we have, how many kilometres of water main, how many schemes we have, how much water we use in a year. The same with sewer. And so it's very general, you can see everything, but then you can also compare with surrounding regions. So in this case, I've compared with Fraser Coast. So our typical annual residential bill for water and sewer is your 1,300, and you've got your 16 for Fraser Coast. So that sort of shows you benchmarking around we're still quite low in pricing. Our capital expenditure is quite low compared to Fraser Coast, who is investing a little bit more into their delivery and the infrastructure. But yeah, so basically we can log in live and take a look. Wanted to do if there's anything.
Can we do that? Spend a couple of minutes doing that.
You so want to go in there.
Yeah, we do. Absolutely.
I can do it at home. I want my tea.
Yeah. We can play. This is now public.
Yeah, so you can go onto the website. It's
Go on.
Appreciate the excitement. We've got one agenda in the
yeah, that's
by the time we get these councillors watered and fed.
But yeah, we just thought it was a cool little tool that you can have a look at, and it does show that we are quite low in cost compared to our surrounding councils in our water and our sewage rates.
What are you trying to say?
I do have a question for that. But something that we already knew that, but now this is fully confirming.
Yeah, everyone in the public can go and have a look at it now themselves, and it's just a really cool tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we just
understand on our water too?
Yeah.
Can we just scroll up to the typical rate? Just want to show you that. I've got the number for at the end of 22. Yeah, typical, this one, here we are. At the end of 21, the typical bill was 1,300. And at the end of June 22, for water plus sewer, it was 1,302. Very little change.
In the right direction?
From 1,300 to 1,302. And yes, and the residential bill, water plus sewer, assuming 200 Ks of kilolitres, it was 1,355. That's assumed that everyone was using 200 kilolitres. Our average consumption year over year went down. We're down to
saying we're not the dearest in
145.
Australia, like it says on Facebook, yeah.
Sorry?
So you're saying we're not the dearest in Australia, as it says on Facebook that we are?
Correct, we're not, nowhere near it. Yeah.
That's the direction here.
Yep.
Yes. So we can email you a link to it so you can have a look at
Well,
it. Have a play or-
Google has found it.
You found it? Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, if people are saying that, they can go online and have a look for themselves. We're not really.
They have somewhere to refer them to.
Through yourself, Mr Mayor, if I just make one comment is when you're actually using the tool, it's important to understand that each council does operate differently. Like some are two-tiered pricing, some are three-tiered pricing, for example, but also to even have different councils account for their operating expenses. Some have the water businesses separated out from council, some have them integrated. So you've got to really understand and know what you're looking at. to get that relative comparison.
Don't take it away, you just gave it to us.
But it's right.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Smith?
Would have been good if you could have given us a comparison of where we would have been now if we had gone down where we were unofficially going a while back, going to Unity. And just the pricing that would have been looking like.
It would have been a lot of a massive jump.
That's what I thought. But anyway.
Just speak into the microphone if you could.
It would have been a massive, would have been a massive jump. Yes.
Any other questions, councillors? Thank you. I know water, you know, the water team, water and sewage team, probably, you know, they're a very strong committed team to what they do. I know that their commitment over the last, 7 years that I've been on council has been exceptional. The work that they've done to maintain the service.
For the whole 7 years?
For the whole, well, the staff. The staff at the front line have done an exceptional job in maintaining that service to the region, and their commitment, as you all know, has gone above and beyond on a lot of occasions. So, it's great to know that not only are they that committed, but they're providing a very cost-effective service when you look at our competitors in other councils around the region, so around the state. So, great work.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, councillors. That concludes our workshop. We will have an early lunch, and